This podcast is brought to you by Spirits Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hi guys, welcome to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. My name is Sydney Jones. This is episode number 22, which is absolutely insane to say. I am here today with my very special guest,
Molly Troupe.
We are going to do our special Christmas episode, our end of the year wrap up, and talk about all 21 episodes that we have recorded in 2024, which is just insane to think about. Because 2024 has been a jam-packed year, at least for me. Molly, do you think that as well for you?
This year has been jam-packed. It's been wild, ups and downs, highs and lows. And it is weird that it's coming to an end.
This year has felt like 10 years and then also like 5 seconds all at the same time. Timey-wimey stuff. It's just very odd.
Yes. Yeah. I love to quote the movie title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that is exactly what it feels like.
You know, I still haven't gotten around to watching that. We're going to put that on the list for my week-long vacation that's coming up here in a bit.
Yes.
But
listeners,
before we
watch that movie.
Before we get into all of that, quick note from our friends at G&D Chillers. They understand that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering that your team needs at no cost to you. Jim Kerr, VP of Manufacturing at Red Boot Beverages, says G&D has been with us since the early days. Their knowledgeable engineers and service techs are there when we need them. We're in the midst of a large expansion, and they have been right there with us to select chiller solutions for today and the future. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Hi, Miss Molly.
Miss Sydney.
Give me a little bit of a recap about what has your past year been looking like outside of podcast land. Professional, if you want to sprinkle in some personal.
Oh, God. Yeah, so this year has been a little bit different. After 7 years at Freeland, I have left my primary role, and now I'm in just in a very limited consulting fashion with them, and am doing consulting. And I have projects. It's funny. I feel like I'm very busy and I have a lot of projects, and I can talk about none of them with any kind of specifics. Some of them are just at that stage where they're so new and they don't have names. And then some of them just waiting to announce. But I am really enjoying kind of getting to do something different and leaning into some different skills, learning new things. It's been a very different year than I was anticipating, but a lot of fun. And I know, Sydney, you kind of had a year too. I'll just let you get into it.
This year was just like an absolute like banner year for just craziness. I moved 3 times in like the period of a month and a half. I moved from Chicago to Evanston and then to Kentucky and took a whole new job at a whole new facility. I went from very small craft, manual, hands-on whiskey distillation, which will always be so near and dear and special to my heart, to learning a lot about distillery startups and large capital projects and the art of construction site management, because it really is an art. It's a very delicate balancing act. And I've been very privileged to be part of this big, beautiful facility that is coming online and is about to make whiskey here so soon. So it's been a crazy transition to think about. My whole career has been centered around such small scale distillation. When I was in Chicago at Few, my final year there, we produced maybe like 75 to 85,000 proof gallons in a year, which is a lot for a craft distillery. And I just thought it was like such a huge number in my mind. And now, in my new role at this new facility, we're going to produce that in like 2 days, which is just when we are running, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
So it's been a big shift in mindset. And then I got married. I talked about my husband 5 seconds. I got married. If you're listening, I got married.
Congratulations. Yay.
She's been married for a month and it's going well.
So excited for you.
Yeah, we had a beautiful ceremony in Bardstown that was very whiskey centric, which was super cute. Shout out to Brian Christensen and Martin Duffy and the Glencairn team for helping me procure 2 little mini Glencairns, the little baby ones. I got them engraved with Mr. and Mrs. and they were our cake topper. And we put shots in them and we toasted before we cut our cake. It's great.
That's so cute. Oh.
Yeah. So it's
Well
been
done,
a year of learning, very whiskey focused, and living in whiskey capital has been an interesting experience too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just reminded myself listening to you and some of the personal stuff too. I was like, oh, I started a perfume company,
You did.
Duality Fragrance, which has been a nice kind of segue into skills from the spirit side, and again another avenue for a lot of learning. That's been great. But more importantly than that, I also had a baby in June.
You made a whole person.
I made a whole person this year.
You made a person.
Yeah, and
so many making things.
Right? So many making, always making. And
always making.
She is almost 6 months, which is, again, this year, it's wild how time just continues to slip away. But I'm really here for her new pterodactyl screams and screeches. It's very, very cute. I do wish she'd do it more, I'll say less frequently. She does it continuously the whole day. But it's really cute. It's really cute.
The soundtrack of your life.
Yeah.
It's just Jurassic Park.
The whole time.
I love catching up with you like this. And if you're listening, thank you for listening to us kind of catch up on each other's personal lives right now, because I think it's a really great reminder that while we do cover a lot of technical stuff in this podcast, distilled spirits are the direct result of people. Distillation happens with people. It is a person-driven activity. And at the core of this podcast, we're just 2 friends who talk to our friends on this show. And I love catching up with people and connecting with them through this podcast. And I think that's been my favorite part of recording it this year. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And I think sometimes that's one of the challenges of, especially being a craft distiller, is often it feels like you're by yourself in a room running equipment all the time. And you don't necessarily have ideas that can be bounced off other people, but also you're just, you're by yourself, and it takes a certain person to be okay with that. It's nice to have more community and have those people that you can reach out to and just be there, even if they're not with you physically, to be able to just have an exchange of ideas and thoughts and whatever it is. That has really been wonderful for me this year, hearing people and and their stories and how they got started and what they really are passionate about. Just, I think, helps to remind you why you got started and to kind of keep that passion alive.
I would agree with that. I think it's really, really easy to get bogged down in the technical side, because Lord knows my brain is just swimming with it constantly nowadays. And it's just important to remember that we are not islands. We are part of a really cool, really beautiful industry that, although it's not perfect, we're in a really unique position where we're all supportive for the most part. And there's this camaraderie there that's really special. Yes, we are in a capitalistic market and we're all trying to sell things and we're all trying to stay afloat. But it doesn't feel like a cutthroat competition like in other industries, if I have an issue, I can call a friend. And I have this past year. A shout out to everyone that I called about tank passivation. Man, that's been a new thing that I've been learning about, is just preparing stainless steel to hold product. Something I'd never dealt with in my career.
Needed help, right?
And I called 5 people and they gave me great resources and things that I could do and places I could look and literature I could read. So this is the people podcast. This is a spirits podcast, but ultimately it's also a people podcast. So important to remember as we go forward, especially as we go forward into the new year and continue to have really cool, really great conversations. I know all of my episodes this year felt like they were very like whiskey centric and they were very blending centric. And that could be also because of like where I am. And that is just my life now. How do you think your podcast kind of went in like the opposite, like more like blending, but like gin as well and things like that?
I think I agree. I had a lot of whiskey and a lot of blending, and I tried to tactfully like pick some people that I wanted to have conversations with that were like not whiskey and not blending, but still it felt like that was like the big topic of the year. But definitely like got to dig into, I think, like hearing from just an industry history standpoint, hearing from Christian Krogstad at Aviation Westward, Krogstad Aquavit, like all these different things that he's done. That was probably one of my favorite conversations. Just and I guess we're getting into favorites. We're picking and choosing, right? They're all our favorites, but just hearing him talk about how he started aviation and how long ago that was, it just puts things into perspective. How time is just slipping away, and in a great way. And like I remember aviation, and it's just been a part of my entire adulthood. I don't know. Aviation is just such a fun one because they've had such a different kind of road to success. And I think a lot of people have looked at it as, and this is what I should do. This is the roadmap. But at the end of the day, how they started was just to make amazing gin. And that's still the goal, even though their methods may have changed.
I love the aviation story so much because, as we kind of mentioned, a lot of what we talked about this year was whiskey. Like whiskey is like the darling child of the American distilling industry, both craft and like large scale. Like just we drink a lot of whiskey in this country. Like bourbon is our national spirit, and aviation is such a cool example of a spirit that isn't whiskey that made it really, really big and is now like in common culture. Like, you know, Tito's did that for vodka as well. Like you think of craft vodka and you think of Tito's, and whether or not that is actually craft now is another conversation entirely. But, you know, Tito's was one of those things that kind of left the clear spirit like minority at the time when spirits were going through this kind of resurgence and became really, really big. And the landscape that was bourbon and whiskey. And aviation's the same. Gin is such a polarizing spirit. You know this. Like I know. How many times have you had the argument like, you probably do like gin, you just need to give it a try. It's not the thing that you threw up in college. You know?
There's other types of gin.
And that's why I love gin, is because I feel like I truly believe, like deep down in my soul, that every person has a gin. You just have to go out and find it and try a lot of gins and try on a lot of shoes like Cinderella. And you'll find your glass slipper. But aviation is just such a cool success story of all the things that made it that big. Like it was a gin. And I think that's so cool, you know?
Yeah. We don't all aspire to that kind of like level of big, but it's, you know, it's what worked out for them, and we're happy for them. But Sydney, I know you just mentioned you talked a lot about whiskey, and of course, like talking about favorite conversations, do you have one that just really sticks out to you? That's kind of one of the favorite topics or the favorite person you, not that we're going to pick favorite people, but favorite topics we had?
It's tricky to go back and look through them. I have favorite moments from all of them. And again, this was like such a nice example of like us just being able to go and like talk to our friends. I love one of my like first like early favorite episodes that I had this year was my conversation with Lisa Wicker, who is my neighbor here in Bardstown. And Lisa has always been such a monumental person in my mind in terms of her career, her experience, everything that she's worked with. and working with these like really cool heirloom variety grains, specifically corn. And she was doing it before like it became a fashionable thing, and I remember I sat and recorded that episode with her in a hotel room when I was here for my job interview in Bardstown. And it just like felt like such a cool kismet moment talking to her about whiskey and the heart of whiskey land, interviewing for my dream whiskey job. And it was just like a really, really special experience, and she's such a special person. That was probably one of my first favorite ones. Really also loved my conversation with Riley at Few, because Riley is like one of my most favorite people I've ever worked with in my life. And like, he wasn't just my boss, he was my friend. And the work that he's doing with Koji at Few Spirits is so unique and interesting. And I'm glad that it got the attention that it really deserved, because it's so innovative, and I don't know anyone else doing anything quite like it. And it was cool to be able to like bring that to the forefront, and then also just like wax poetic with him before I moved on out of Chicago. And we cried. It was beautiful and great. So those were like the early on favorite ones of mine. And I loved your one with Allie, because Allie Ochoa is my neighbor also now, and I see her like every other day. So that was I'm jealous that you got to interview Allie, because
I called dibs very early on. And that was such a fun episode too, because she was just in a point of her life where she was making a big change too. And it was like, we weren't talking about it because it wasn't announced. And she's been there now at her new job for, like over 6 months, and is just, I'm sure, kicking butt and having a lot of fun. And it's just like, this is part of where it's, connecting with people, but all the people we've talked to this year, we enjoy on like a friend level, peer level, all these different things. And so it's fun to see what everyone's doing and where they're succeeding.
Yeah, agree. It's been really fun too, because you'll interview someone and I'll be like, damn it. I wanted to get to them first. And that was with Caitlin Bartlemay at Clear Creek, because Caitlin and I also we're in a Lord of the Rings meme group on Instagram that we've created with friends of ours. And we just send each other Lord of the Rings memes like all day, every day. I remember that you posted that episode. I'm like, damn it. She got to her before I did.
I had a similar moment with Mark from Whiskey Delback where I reached out to him to talk about some whiskey that I was working on. And I asked, I was like, hey, do you ever want to? And he's like, well, actually, like, Sydney got to me first.
Sydney's claimed me.
And the next day the episode dropped, and I was like, well, you know what? You had fun. That's all we care about. But there's definitely, we have a lot of friends and peers in common. And I think we should interview more people just together and just solve that.
It's very true. That's also something we could do in the future. My favorite thing about Mark, God bless him, we tried to record an episode, like, I kid you not, like 5 or 6 times over, and we had technical difficulties every single time. And I'm like, a demon doesn't want this to happen, because like obviously it's going to be amazing. But to the point where I'm like, this has to happen, because I'm stubborn, and like we have been through hell, and I will interview you even if it like costs me my sanity. And it ended up being great, and it produced, I think, the funniest catchphrase of my like interviewing year. And it was, there are 2 wolves inside of you. One wants to do marketing for your whiskey brand, and the other wants to stay in production, because that's kind of a role that Mark has taken on right now. And I could just see the t-shirt in my mind of like really corny wolves like fighting with each other, but one has like a marketing hat on and one has a production hat. And it's a very clear vision. I wish I could make t-shirts, because I would make that and send it to Mark in a heartbeat.
I am learning how to make t-shirts. One of the many things trying to do this year. So I might be able to help you out with that.
We're doing too much, man.
but it's just
we
so
need
fun.
to find a better balance with our hobbies. But, talking about...
There's still a t-shirt that I owe the whole gin class from 2023. I owe everyone a t-shirt that I was going to design. I haven't forgotten. It's in the works.
I remember that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Molly and I teach a gin class together, and we envisioned the design for a t-shirt that we were going to give out to everyone. And now I can't even remember what the t-shirt was.
I have it saved somewhere. So this is one of the... It's not going to be a new girl meme this time that we exchange. It'll be gin t-shirt.
But talking about, Mark and Caitlin, these are two really talented friends of ours that produce really incredible spirits, but they personally have a lot invested with their careers and their brands in the American Single Malt game, which as of now, when we are recording this, American Single Malt has a legal designation from the TTB. So exciting. And big thing that we need to talk about on this show. I am so glad to see that it doesn't perfectly resemble other single malt designations around the world. Like, it fits with what producers have been doing. We can still use new charred oak. We can still use used casks. Like, we can still put this very American new oak spin on it, but keep it familiar to those that know single malt, where it has to be 100% malted barley. It can't be like 100% malted rye or something weird, malted oat or malted corn or whatever else. How are you feeling about it?
I feel really good seeing it come through, because I wasn't like on the forefront of this fight. It wasn't like one of my products is not on the line for this. But one of the things I always was a little concerned about was exactly what you brought up, the barrel, the cask, and what we were going to be allowed to use, because it is such a huge thing in American whiskey to be using new cooperage. And just we know people who make American Single Malt who use new. We also know a lot of people who use used barrels, and I was just hoping for people's programs that wasn't going to be the case, where they were like, no, you actually can't use used barrels, and now what is that whiskey going to be called?
Yeah, and I know plenty of people that have incorporated both as well into their program, just to like really balance that intensity of new oak. And I think it's like one of those rare moments where the government actually listened to the American Single Malt Commission and people who really lobbied for it, because it would have been so easy just to like copy and paste other single malt definitions from other countries, like, for example, Scotland, but this is a country where like new oak is king, and it is so ingrained in our drinking lexicon now that any whiskey that's not coming out of new oak, there's always seems like there is some skepticism from your consumer, because they don't know anything else. That's what they get from rye. That's what they get from bourbon. That's what they get from, wheat whiskey. Mm-hmm. So I'm really happy to see that for American Single Malt in particular, not only do we have clarity on what it is, but it's not going to hurt existing distilleries that are producing it and producing it so well. Like, we don't have to see them alter their practices either.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I think also from, a sustainability with trees and with lumber for making barrels, like it's nice to see that the used option's not getting taken away, and that there's going to be even more competition when it comes to new cooperage, because that is just a reality too. And it's nice for us to have our own products that are whiskey that we can use our own used barrels for.
Exactly. Especially there's that crunch of barrels right now. And I know I've talked about it to publications on like, how do you balance this used barrel crunch? And I talked about it when I was at Few at the time, that we diversified the barrels that we were getting in. We were using 2 different brands of cooperage. We were using Independent Stave, and we were using Barrel Mill at the time. And there were questions of like, well, there are different cooperages, there are different ways of making those 2 barrels, and they're also just sourcing wood from different places. Like, what is the impact going to be down the road? And how were other distilleries going to face this barrel shortage head on? And I said at the time that I thought it was going to be a lot more common that you're seeing more and more distilleries that are relying on used cooperage and producing things that might be a little different, doing American Single Malt, doing distilled spirit specialty products that incorporate used cooperage, because that's what's going to be available. And it doesn't necessarily make it bad. It's just there isn't like a designation for that. But we finally have a designation that happily allows us to use used cooperage. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is like the only whiskey designation that we have in the US other than corn whiskey where we can use used cooperage.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that it is the only one. And, well, corn whiskey. I'm not sure about that one, but it is the only major. Corn whiskey.
Corn whiskey can be used or uncharred. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And corn whiskey isn't something that has like taken off in a huge way. Not in the way that I think American Single Malt has. You know, you had this really cool like culture of it bloom out of the West Coast and make its way east. Whereas, you know, Heaven Hill has mellow corn and you have other corn whiskey producers out there. But American Single Malt, I think, has been a bigger conversation than corn whiskey. And that's not to say that corn whiskey can't make some big comeback, especially as cooperage crunches may continue to be a concern. And I love corn whiskey. Freaking drink mellow corn all the time. One of my favorite things. But yeah, it's just cool to see that there's a little bit more flexibility now in the TTB literature where we can incorporate used cooperage. Thank you, government.
Yes. Good job, TTB.
Tossing us a bone.
Kudos.
Kudos.
Yeah. And I kind of just to snowball off that topic, you know, we're seeing that there's some distilleries that are like cutting down production. And I think that also means that there's a chance that we might have less of a cooperage crunch too, which if any good can come from that would be that.
Yeah. It's an interesting time where the TTB has released this new designation. There's a lot of excitement about that. We have spent a year almost interviewing so many whiskey producers and blenders who make really incredible things. And yet, like, the market is down for whiskey, and you see a lot of places that are kind of rolling back production on that. And you're seeing other spirits like agave really reign supreme. I think that could be potentially cool in the next year. I would love to talk to an agave producer on the show because that is the one thing that I have never made. And I have a lot of questions for them because it's like the last frontier for me is distilling something agave based.
There was a distillery out in Oregon that was on and called Cannon Beach Distillery. And I think they've been defunct for maybe 4 years now. But one of my like favorite craft products, and they made an agave based spirit that they called Quixote, and it was so wonderful, so easy, so delicious, and I still think about it often. It's one of those like the loves that got away, I guess, when it comes to spirits.
MB Roland in Pembroke, Kentucky, they have done like I think it's Kentucky is wool, but they're producing an agave spirit as well, like in the heart of Kentucky. And it's definitely an interesting new class of spirit. I think not new, but you're seeing more of an interest with it on the craft side as we're seeing kind of like big agave and big tequila like really, really boom right now and being such drivers in the market. I think that's going to be something that we continue to see more of in 2025 because these waves do not ebb and flow on a yearly basis. They're like a 5 to 10 year sometimes thing. I think we're going to see big crests before we see big drops, you know?
And from what we both understand with agave too, like that plant in itself takes a long time to mature. And a lot of like that is imported agave, but there are places in the United States where you can grow agave too. And to see how we might have American grown agave place and start seeing products that are completely like that. I mean, that's here. Is it growing? Will tariffs help? Like, it's hard to know. It's a really interesting time to kind of get a pulse on these, what seem odd projects, but they're going to become more and more familiar as time goes on.
I think they're exciting. I tried a few months ago an American-made Sotal, like a Sotal-esque spirit that was submitted for consideration for a competition I was judging, and I was like so blown away by it because I love Sotal. I think it's a funky, weird, cool spirit, and I was excited to see that like someone was playing around with it here in the U.S. And I think necessity drives innovation, and I think you're going to see more of that happening on the innovation front. But
speaking of interesting,
yeah.
I remember you talking about another spirit that you got to try at that competition that I believe was featuring a little feathered friend.
A little feathered friend.
Or a big feathered friend, I guess.
Big feathered?
Wasn't it? And didn't you you had to taste something that was a
my God,
style?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I will never forget. I will forget most of the details, but I will never forget emu.
Emu, for those who are listening, emu, the bird, the big giant bird. Yeah, I speaking of like weird things that I've drank this past year, because I like drinking weird, interesting things, especially outside of the normal bourbon that my life revolves around. When I was in Washington, D.C., shout out to Cotton Reed for producing the spirit at one point. They had it on the menu in a cocktail, but they don't have it for sale, like in their gift shop or their bottle room anymore, unfortunately. Or otherwise, I would have bought a case and like figured out how to smuggle it on an airplane because it was just so wild. But it was a like Pachuga style spirit. So it was a rum because they make rum there, and they distilled it over emu neck meat and raspberries. And everyone I tell this to, either like there's two reactions. Oh my God, that's so fucking cool. Or, oh my God, why would someone do that? And sometimes they can be the same reaction from the same person. But it was so cool. And I love Pachuga style spirits to begin with because I love the mouthfeel that you get out of them. And I've had a lot of Pachuga like tequilas, but this was my first Pachuga style rum with like emu, specifically emu. So if you're listening to this and you're a craft producer and you would like to delight me, please make another Pachuga with some weird meat, kangaroo, llama,
mystery meat,
spam. Just do something weird and send it to me, and I will talk about it in depth on this show because I just think they're so interesting. Meat is the last cool frontier as a botanical.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like I love this because both of our kind of like venture into the weird spirits that are just wonderful, delightful drams. Like mine this year was from Baltimore Spirits Company. Have you had their Pachuga style apple brandy?
I'm obsessed with it.
It's so good.
Obsessed. Yeah.
So good. Love it.
Mm-hmm. It is high proof. It's punchy. It tastes like a holiday ham in like the best way. Like it reminds me of like country, because that's what they distilled over was ham, and it's gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
I wish I had it still. I drink that bottle real quick. If you're listening to this,
shout out Eli.
We love it.
Yeah.
Please send them to us.
I wanted to make sure that I got it right because I was like, I think it's ham. And then I'm looking at the website and it's the smoked apple brandy. So they might have varieties, but it says over wild pawpaws, persimmons, and Maryland country ham. Wonderful.
Yeah. Meat spirits. Big fan of them. I gave a presentation this past year at the American Craft Spirits Association conference in Denver, where we talked about distilled spirit specialties, and we talked about meat spirits, and it was great because I just think they're cool and they're fun, and I want to see more of them in the American craft distilling world.
Yes, yes, please. I was just thinking of your talk. That was a very fun talk, and what Reed was up there with you, wasn't he?
Reed was, and you talked to Reed. That was like your second episode, was talking to Reed on RTDs. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I love about are kind of, I think we have the similarity with interview process is usually like send a script through and we kind of know what we want to talk about in a broad sense. And then you start having a conversation with someone, you're like, I need to like really dive into this one topic very seriously. And like, I need to know a lot about what you're talking about. And for Reed and me, that was water. We spent so much time just talking about water and how, because I particularly, and I'm sure you know this too, because you worked in Florida, I find the fascination between your guys' water source and what you guys need to do with it. I mean, it's so vastly different than the water treatment we have to do over here. And especially for you worked at a larger facility versus a small, like, obviously I'm getting very excited about it all over again, but water is very important to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and water is so romanticized here in Kentucky. The limestone water makes our whiskey taste good and it makes our horses run faster. Like that's like constantly parroted on Kentucky bourbon trail tours. And you know, that remains to be seen. If you have opinions about that, I love that for you. But it's really interesting moving from Chicago that has like this big, huge reservoir of like remarkably clean water. Like Lake Michigan is a beautiful, relatively clean in terms of like the cleanness scale of like the world's water in general. A lot of really clean water and like doesn't require a whole lot of doctoring up to make it taste palatable and good. And I remember we didn't have to do too much to it when I lived there to just drink it happily out of the tap. So water quality is a big thing, and people get really, especially brewers, get really, really, really into water because the water that they use to brew is what goes into a can or a bottle. Here in distilling land, the water that we use for process is going to get distilled off, but what you're proofing with is very, very important. Are you using reverse osmosis? Are you using distilled water? Are you using deionized water? Are you like what kind of water are you using? Is a big topic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and yeah, it just. I mean, it makes absolute sense, as a lot of water quality choices do over time. But like to have your facilities so like nailed down that you need to check twice a day and you need to check it this time of day because this is when you're switching water sources. And I mean, it's the things that we learn as we're doing our job. We're like, something's not working. Why is that? You start an investigation. You find the culprit. And then you figure out how to make it better. And anytime that we're kind of talking about these things and problem solving, I just find it fascinating because we're all going through the same things, different topics of frustration, but ultimately, like we're all taking those steps and trying to figure out what the culprit is. Is it a raccoon in your warehouse causing mayhem? It's a very specific call out, but there was a facility that I used to work at where the health inspector would come in, and if he saw like a roll-up door that was open for delivery, he's like, "Why is that open? A whole family of raccoons could come in here." And that saying has never left my brain.
I mean, Kentucky has a big raccoon problem, and I've heard stories of raccoons terrorizing facilities and the homes of people I work with. So not super outside the realm of possibilities that a distiller would have to deal with. So, but water, I feel like that's a conversation anyone is going to have. And the kind of water you're going to use is, hey, what do you have locally available? Does it have a ton of chlorine or fluoride, or does it have a hard mineral content? Do you need to invest in DI or RO? What kind of system can you afford? And there's like no right answer. And it's interesting to see how everybody does it. I think you talking to Reed also about RTDs and the production of those. And you've worked on RTDs as well. I've never worked on RTDs, and RTDs exploded so fast over the past few years. And now I feel like they're starting to fall off a little bit. We're seeing some brands that are consolidating their RTD line that are ceasing production on their RTDs. And I'm wondering if that's a trend we're going to see continue over the next few years as well.
Yeah, it's a curious thing. Like everything kind of at some point or another will hit a top, right? And it will have no place to go for growth because we're dealing with consumers, and consumers' preferences change, and you just never. I mean, I'm sure people like to think that they completely know how the trends are going to go, but reality is we never do. It's really interesting to see RTDs and how they have just blown up, and we saw this really start in the craft scene where we're coming up with some really cool canned cocktails and seeing really a lot of exploration in high proof cocktails as well. And I think what I've seen a lot more on the recent side is less on canned and more in like bottle and more bottle style cocktails that are emerging. It's an interesting, bottled cocktails allow you to have a lot different types of proof. It's a little bit more shelf stable as well, a lot more shelf stable, and still an exploration into flavors and things that you can't just do with straight up spirits. And I don't know, I feel like those still have a lot of growth potential, but that's not my expertise. Have you done much diving into bottled cocktails lately?
I haven't. I'm curious about them. I'm really curious about your statement that like higher proof bottled cocktails might be generating more interest, because I know a big conversation a lot of the bigger producers are having is that like barrel proof has been king for so long, and now we're seeing like a consumer trend where people are wanting lower proofs again. 80, 90, 100. We're starting to see like barrel proof fall off a little bit in terms of like an interest and a desire in the market. We're seeing people that are wanting something that is a little tamer. So it's always curious to see how these kind of scales balance each other. And I like the idea of a higher proof bottled cocktail that you can dilute yourself over ice, because that's sometimes my problem with these RTDs, that when you pour them over ice, not always are they like formulated for additional dilution. They're a lot of them are designed just to be chilled, but if you want to pour them over ice, and I like doing so because if I drink them out of a can, I drink them too fast and then everything goes sideways for me. So I like the idea of a higher proof, ready to drink because it will stand up to dilution a little better. I think it'll hold its flavor a little bit better. And this is just the bartender in me thinking. And I can stretch that drink a little longer in my glass, and I'm just not like chugging that out of a can, which I am sometimes liable to do.
At Freeland for a while, we had a French 75 canned cocktail, and it was around 15%, so about as high as you really want to go in a can. And I always found it really interesting because it was very drinkable right from the can. Honestly, even warm, which is disgusting, but you do it every once in a while. Very good chilled and very good on ice, and it would continue to it had a high enough ABV where it still would continue to feel strong enough on ice. But there's that line, that limit where you really have, and it's a conversation as a producer. You're trying to take this and think of how someone's going to consume it. And you're thinking RTDs are for convenience, so it's going to be maybe specifically drank from a can, but you really don't know that. And so it was always interesting with these canned cocktails. We'd get feedback, oh, this is delicious, this is the best thing ever. Oh, I had this on ice, it didn't taste very strong. And I'm like, well, it's a hard problem to solve because there's no right answer. And I think that's one of my favorite things about bottled cocktails, because like it's an obvious, you're probably not going to drink that straight. You're not going to drink it straight from the bottle. You're going to put it on ice. So it's like, this is an easier conversation to have with a consumer.
And if you do, we listen, we don't judge.
Exactly.
We listen and we do not judge.
We do what we need to do in the year 2024 to make it through.
Exactly. Very, very true. Oh, man. Yeah. RTDs are an interesting landscape right now, for sure. It's been really interesting to see how they've kind of evolved. Some of them have taken like a very sustainable like turn, which has been a big buzzword I know in the industry as well. Sustainability, and I know we've talked about that a little bit over the course of the podcast. We've also talked about new technology. Like I know I talked about AI with Nicole Austin. Just a lot of changes in terms of new operations coming online and like things that they're really focusing on right now. Sustainability is a big one. Artificial intelligence is a big one. And we talked specifically on Nicole's podcast of like, you have to feed AI something for it to understand what kind of parameters that it's trying to analyze. Have you had similar conversations as well, or any like observations that you've seen with new technologies and trends coming out of industries this year?
I cannot think of a single one off the top of my head. I'm like, whoa. For AI specifically, I am just drawn to the conversation of that there was a presentation at American Craft Spirits Association on that topic, and it was talking about using AI for gathering information for your tasting rooms on your consumers, and it's very, very impactful information. It's something that when you're running a business, you definitely want to think about how that can help you potentially grow or understand your consumers more, maybe understand really if they want to put your RTD over ice versus straight out of the can. Maybe it could help answer that question. A lot of conversations I feel like I've had this year are less on like technology. Always sustainability is on everyone's mind, but not a lot on the technological improvements. But I might be forgetting. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your AI with Nicole.
It was really just kind of, we were talking about trends that we were seeing and how it had become such a big buzzword. And specifically, I think AI for the sake of AI in the spirits industry, when you're building out a facility or if you're modifying it or if you're trying to incorporate it into your production in any way, AI for the sake of AI is dumb. AI for the sake of generating interest is dumb. AI for the sake of generating meaningful data extrapolation, though, could be potentially useful. And I'm hoping that's what AI in the industry is starting to morph into, is just really sophisticated data analysis. Sherry Moore and I talked quite a bit about all the data that she analyzed in her time at Jack Daniel's, and that was also such a cool conversation to have. We talked a lot about the studies that she helped pioneer with barrel toasting with ISC and how big of a role Jack Daniel's played in that. And that was a really, really awesome conversation. And it's just cool to talk to someone like Sherry, who's been in this game for so long. And she's like one of those not unsung, but like really pivotal characters in American distilling. And she has really helped shape so much of the whiskey that we know and we drink. Sherry has done so much really cool stuff in her career working with a company like Jack Daniel's. And it's just it's inspirational to see another woman who has been in the game for so long and worked for a company of that magnitude. And I had kind of a similar starstruck experience interviewing Jackie Zyhan. That was another one of my favorite ones because we cursed so much on that podcast. We just the amount of times that we said fuck was just amazing. And she had such a unique and interesting take on blending that was so personal and so different than other approaches that I had heard. And it was very philosophical and very esoteric. And it just sounded it sounded like magic when we were talking about it. And I had admired her for so long. And we talked a little bit about her perfume company as well. I wish it was one of those podcasts where I was I wish Molly was here. I wish Molly was having this conversation with me because Molly would love this right now.
Yeah.
And that was a really fun conversation.
Oh. I got to listen to it, so I felt like I was there, and it was just so fun hearing her. And again, it's like the people you admire, and you get to know them just a little bit through these experiences, and it's so fun to do that. And I don't know, it just makes me think of too, like other people like that have that commonality that you can continue having conversations with. I don't know if you are super excited about any conversations coming up that we haven't recorded,
Um,
but we're going
you
to.
know, I haven't gotten that far in my life planning right now. Where I'm just really excited to get to January. Do you have some though that you're super excited about? I would love to. I know I really want to record more with like rum producers and agave
Mhm.
producers and more like liqueur. Like I want to start branching outside of whiskey a little bit more.
Yeah, like I have a few conversations I'm looking for, though there's a couple that are confirmed. There's a couple that I've talked to and like just timing hasn't worked out yet. Um and one of them is one of our favorite rum producers, Maggie Campbell. Little Maggie, come on stateside
You
again.
stole her. I
I
was
know.
literally thinking as we were talking, like, I texted Maggie the other day, saying that I was thinking about her. I was sitting in a restaurant in Louisville, and they like, sir, it's a Cuban restaurant, and their mojitos, they serve them with like big sticks of like sugar cane, and it's my favorite thing
Mm,
to just like gnaw on it like a carrot, like a rabbit. And I texted her, I'm
yeah.
like, hey, I'm just like gnawing on some sugar cane right now. I hope you're doing really well. I hope you don't think this is weird. Yeah, Maggie, God, what a icon, especially of
Mhm.
rum production.
Yeah, and I don't know. Rachel Berry has just been always like on my list. Like one day we're gonna have a
Is she
conversation.
your white whale?
She
Because I have a
is.
white whale as well. I think I've talked about him like 6 times on this podcast, and everyone always like gives me shit for it. Todd Leopold. I text Todd
Yes.
Leopold all the time. I talk to Todd constantly. And Todd
I
is
was
one
like,
of my
you
most
probably
favorite
talked to him
people.
about passivation.
I did talk to Todd
Yeah.
about passivation. Have I talked to him on this podcast yet? No.
No.
It is that we're going to nail down Todd Leopold for 2025. I promise
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Because I've talked about him so much in other conversations because he's, one of those people who he's just everywhere all at once, all the time,
Yeah.
whatever
And I
that movie
mean,
title is.
yeah, everything everywhere all at once.
It's Todd
I,
Leopold.
Todd Leopold, like what hasn't he done when it comes to craft spirits? I just am constantly in admiration for people who are like I I don't like the phrase creative geniuses, but I'm going to use it for him. And like who just get to like he has made a playground for distillers and like it's probably one of my favorite facilities I've ever gone from like just the gaze of here's someone who's very much loves their craft and wants to like explore all like the favorite things that everyone always wishes that they got to do. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
agree. And it's been cool to watch, he resurrected the 3-chamber still from so much research. And one of the things that Nicole Austin and I talked about on her podcast, because she's worked so closely with Todd, is that like Dickel had in their history like a 3-chamber still. Like it is like, well, it's not like an appropriation to blend Dickel whiskey with 3-chamber whiskey because Dickel had a 3-chamber still at one point in their history, which I thought was so cool. It like blew my mind. And it was a really, really amazing moment. But also we see more 3-chamber stills that are being manufactured. And there's a 3-chamber still that has made its way back into, I believe, Maryland.
Yeah,
Yeah. Matt Strickland, his operation has just
that's who it
gotten
is.
a 3-chamber still, and cannot wait to see more 3-chamber spirits being produced. I know Todd is working on a 3-chamber brandy. I'd love to also talk to more brandy producers. I know you talked to Andy
Hmm.
from Stone Barn as
Oh
well.
yeah. Yeah, and another person who's like just living the creative dream. Like he gets to work on so many different variety of projects. And I mean he uses like that creative hat all the time. I mean they do a lot of different brandies there. They do a lot of, oddball stuff. Ramen whiskey.
I love their Nocino. That's where I fell in love with Nocino was
Yeah.
Stone Barn's Nocino.
Yeah, and his Tough Talk brand that he started, just that's just him. I think they just recently released a vermouth, and it was just so fun. Their marketing is very, very different, but you could just tell the amount of love that went into that product between him and the winemaker that he partnered with. It's so simplistic, and I think it's perfect for them because it's just like a notebook page ripped out with Sharpie with the launch date and invite details, and them basically professing how much they like fell in love with this project and each other over like 1,000 texts. And I just love seeing that for other people and how much joy that they got from this project.
I love very official things that are on like very unofficial pieces of paper.
Right.
Like when in Grey's Anatomy, where Meredith and Derek got married on a Post-it note. that kind of thing. It's always delightful for me. Maybe it's because I like live my life writing things in Sharpie on notebooks and just tearing them and like slapping them on my wall to remember what. Like my computer at work is just like covered in like sticky notes with random things that like don't even matter anymore, but they're still there because it's like my emotional support sticky note.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't know the impact of tossing them and how that would impact your life.
So why would I?
Exactly. You don't.
I feel the same way about tabs on my computer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I have 50 billion tabs open on my computer at any given time, and I will not close a single one of them.
My advice to you is, because that's my MO, is to not get a Chromebook for that reason. Because I think my Chromebook hates me. It's like close the tabs. And I don't want to because they're there for a reason and I want them where I can see them.
Yeah. Do you have any New Year's resolutions regarding conversations you want to have? I know we talked about like people we want to get on the podcast, but like things you want to do production wise or spirits you want to drink or just like something industry related that is a New Year's resolution?
Like where to begin? My resolution is to stop talking about writing this and actually write this because it's just in my head and I need to just get it out into paper. Is just an article, a long article, a book review. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, but it'll be linking perfume and spirits and talking about a lot of the commonalities for production as well as a lot of the differences and kind of culminating in talking about blending and how it pertains to both of those things. And it's something that, I don't know, it doesn't exist as far as I know. And there's a lot of resources talking about both of those things. And I just want to link them and use my little brain to talk and figure out more about it.
I love that. Especially a lot of perfume is made like with rotary evaporators as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you are the rotary evaporator queen in my head. Right. When I think of rotovaps, I think of Molly Troupe.
That's right. And so I think it's going to be fun, like talking about essential oils and production and using different techniques for that and rotovap. And then, I'm sure there's some more otter techniques that I'm not, and that sounds like an otter, but we're going with it. Some different techniques that I'm not super familiar with perfumery. And I just can't wait to like dig into that material. And I guess at the end of the day, like I want to learn about it all. I want to like dive deep in it and then produce something that I can hopefully someone will read it.
I love that. I'll read it. I'll read whatever you write.
Thank you. And I mean, I know like this has been such a big year and you've learned a lot of like new techniques. I am still fascinated about like dry house and all of those new things that you kind of had coming your way. But is there any place in particular like you want 2025 to take you?
I am kind of drinking from the fire hose right now in terms of everything that I'm learning between, dry house technology and like live yeasting. And there's just like a lot of different processes that I've never done before that I will be doing a lot of in this new year. Outside of that, though, everything in my life has become so like whiskey focused, which I love because like whiskey was my first love. It's the thing that I'm married to. And I'm super, super cool with that. But for this podcast, I would like, as I kind of mentioned before, to talk to more producers of things that like I either haven't made in a really long time or I've never made before. I'd love to talk more to rum producers. I'd love to talk to more agave producers, liqueurs. There is like a chartreuse shortage, and we're seeing really cool chartreuse alternatives on the market right now. I would love to learn more about that. Even vodka. Have we had a vodka guest on the podcast?
No.
Which is kind of crazy to think about, because vodka, like I had a t-shirt for a long time that said vodka pays the bills, because vodka like really does like sometimes pay the bills, you know, a lot of vodka is still consumed. We don't necessarily talk about vodka in the same excited manner we talk about other things, but vodka is still like a really big player in the game. So I think in the next year, outside of like my everyday job, I would like just love to like deep dive, learn more about the things that I'm not producing, to just like kind of keep me excited about what I am producing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's like the goal for continual education. You just want to continue to learn, and you are learning so much for work, but you gotta kind of, I say learn for pleasure too, right? There's certain stuff like maybe you'll never use it, but just learning more about it, if it brings you joy, why wouldn't you? Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to like listen to all of our episodes, which means like the absolute world. It still is crazy to me that someone wants to hear my, quite frankly, sometimes very annoying voice for like an hour at a time when they play episodes, because I'm really self-conscious of how I sound in this microphone at all times. But thank you for like listening to us this past year, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it and you've taken away something from it. I know I really enjoy recording them. I don't want to speak for Molly, but I feel like Molly also probably really enjoys recording them too, right?
Absolutely. And I'm going to say my own thank you, everyone, for listening. And I also want to tell you that if there's something that we're not talking about that really interests you, we are both the type of people who are very good at listening about that. If there's some kind of topic out there that's just burning, like, why has no one talked about this? Ask, please.
Tell us.
Reach out.
I love constructive criticism. Sometimes I also like mean criticism. So just send it all my way. Just tell me to be better or talk about something. I swear to God, I will do it.
We want to learn. We want to learn, and we want other people to learn. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, if there's something out there, please let us know.
I feel like that's a really good way, like, to wrap up.
I think so.
Everything too. Our last episode of the year. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in again. It both means the world. Thank you for taking this journey with us. And thank you for listening to us kind of go back through and hit highlights. Every single guest was so special. If we didn't talk about a guest in particular, that doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful at all. Every conversation was really, really wonderful. And I can't wait to do a whole nother year's worth of really intriguing, interesting, educational episodes for myself and for other people. So before we sign off for the last time in 2024, it is important to remember that for more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. There is some really incredible content that is posted up there. I very much enjoy reading it. I think you guys would as well. If you want to learn more about what I am working on, or if you like looking at dog pictures, or pictures of my new husband, I'm on Instagram at SYD NEAT_Jones, Sydney Jones. You can follow me there. I post a lot of stuff about projects that I'm working on there. Molly, if people want to learn more about what you're working on, where should they go?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram as well. I am whiskey, spelt the American way, .biscuit. So that's whiskey.biscuit. And I try to limit my pictures of my children, but I post a lot more stories these days than I do posts. I don't know why. Just how the world is working for me.
Sometimes
follow
I
me.
post memes to my stories, and they're just
I love a good
nonsense.
meme.
Or they're just like moody girl memes. Yeah, like slams the laptop shut over the weekend, stuff like that. So if you like girly pop moody memes, I'm the account for you. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We look forward to talking to you guys more in 2025. We'll be back in another few weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsdistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsdistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.